move food growing to North Africa and the Sahel, put all the new investment capital there to restart the economy after this one collapses, and then have a centralized food distribution point for the entire planet from that area.
China specifically, that getting ahead of the cycle by building this massive infrastructure in Africa so that when that transition happens and when the growing in all the other regions of the world really comes and it becomes much more difficult, that they're setting up between this, potentially a gold-backed global payment system, everything, they're setting up the next stage of history for mankind. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Man in America. I'm your host, Seth Holehouse. So if you're like me, which if you watch the show enough, maybe I've worn off on you a little bit, I'm constantly digging. I'm constantly trying to understand what is behind what's happening in the world right now. There's just so much to understand, but sometimes you find these people that you can talk to that take you to this million-foot view where everything starts to make a little more sense. And today that person is David Dubine. Maybe you've heard of him. He's famous for his Adapt 2030 channel. But we're going to be diving deep into cycles. No, what an important point, because it's so easy to throw out terms like the Great Awakening and talk about, okay, everyone's waking up and we're breaking out of the matrix, but it almost seems surface compared to, I think, a lot of what you're talking about. And so, you mentioned perception management, right? And that these controllers are managing the perception of them, right? So, and this could be a very long question to try to identify, but what do you think is the perception they want us to have of them? And what do you think is the truth of them behind that they're trying to use the perception as a mask to cover up? So what is the mask that they're trying to put on, and what's behind it?
That they're invincible, that whatever action you take will make no difference. Resistance is futile. The Borg really taught us a lot about how the operational mind of this elite class works. It's the perception that whatever we do, even if humanity, as we come together as a whole, we will have no sway or impact. It's already set in stone. Don't even bother, because it's already set. The reset is going. All these billionaires are doing it. There's nothing you can do, so why even try? That's the perception they want to give you, because they realize that if we all do come together and all start to say no, you don't even have to do anything. Just say no. That's really the scariest thing, even for the perception on the top and the leaders, is what if they all wake up and say no one day? Then what? It's really that easy. But it's hard to get all of humanity to agree on a certain point, to just wake up and go, no, I'm not going to agree to this system anymore. I'm not going to agree to that system anymore. No. We're all going to stop working for a few months. Just deal with it. And again, in a bit woo-woo, if you believe in thought creates reality and you can focus your thought, and then where your laser focus goes, then something grows. I've heard that term a few times. If you can get the news and the media and all the outlets and whatever people are viewing, including social media, to build a picture and then have people in their mind manifest that reality for them, that's, in my opinion, what's being done today. Is the reality is not in any way set yet. Still, it's like this ether state that hasn't coagulated into anything solid. But the way they're using the social media and all these outlets to get you to think that it's like that, it's almost as if they're having us create the reality that they want for them.
If you're suffering from daily aches and pains, listen closely. Top medical experts have unveiled a natural pain reliever that is changing the way Americans fight pain. 100% drug-free Canalidine. Canalidine is the only solution in the world that optimizes your body's natural painkillers called endorphins, providing full body relief without dangerous pills or known side effects. Over 1 million Americans and hundreds of professional athletes, including UFC fighters, have already embraced Canalidine's pain relief power. Best of all, Canalidine is legal worldwide, certified drug-free, and does not cause side effects, grogginess, or addiction. After 14 years of clinical research, it's been proven safe and effective, backed by thousands of successful use cases from other Americans just like you. Best of all, today you can try Canalidine for less than $1 a day. Click on that link below to try the only canolidine product in the world, 90 days risk-free. The only thing you have to lose is your pain. And now on with the video.
And it's such an important reminder is that it is that simple. I mean, because I think especially for someone that here in America, I grew up in a really simple Midwestern middle-class family. There was nothing crazy about the world. It was relatively peaceful. And for me, what really shook me up was learning about, communism and this evil that kind of broke me a little bit and like, oh my gosh, like this world is not what I thought it was. But then kind of from there, though, it was just this process of understanding the depth of the evil that you're up against. And I feel like, and it's tricky because it's a very hard line to walk in the middle of, because I also don't want to reinforce this belief that they have so much power and control. What the truth is that they really are the old man behind the curtain and Wizard of Oz.
You just said such the important point there, the set of limiting beliefs that they put on top of most of mankind except themselves. Because if their ability to generate wealth and generate that type of vast fortune is possible on this supposedly limited planet resource-wise, then everybody should be able to generate that type of wealth too. Maybe we're just not thinking big enough and if I had that much wealth, I'd be doing something positive for humanity myself. It's just the way I am, though. I'd like everybody to have a meal at night or have extra food so they can solve problems and be disease-free, but that's just me. I think all the world should have that as a baseline operating procedure is you have 3 meals, everybody has extra calories. Stuff should just be way back in the past, like lead pipes from the Romans. Like that's how far we should be in the future. That's what I would be doing with my billions and trillions. But see, the limiting belief they put on top of humanity is you can never, and I always hate that phrase, hard-earned money. Why is it hard to earn the money? They start you from kindergarten. It's hard-earned. There's not enough. There's a scarcity, but not for them. What are they doing differently for manifesting this perception of reality to build that and have it come into their hands versus what they're teaching the rest of us down here? Because I'll blow your mind for a second here too, is we as humans, we need food. That's one of our things. We need food and water and air. And if we don't have enough of that, then we die. So as this change in magnetic field on our planet happens, the areas where we can grow food, generally, just as a general, anywhere 45 north and above is going to really reduce in yields. And some place will come down to zero, like Canada's struggling right now. China's struggling. Up on our border area, struggling as well. So there's a lot of areas that have been mapped out in previous cycles where food production decreases. Australia would be one of them. South America is another. So the whole thing is, with all this going on, you heard this term BRICS nations. That's the largest transfer of wealth in human history. Now, where's it transferring to? Well, it's going over to Middle East, North Africa, etc. But with the research I've done and many other, the Sahel area of Africa is going to become much wetter, which it already is. And then they haven't tapped any of those aquifers under there, the Nubian Sandstone Aquifer, the Sus Aquifer, and there's many others. They could set up a new grow zone, and this is one of the plans I'd read about before. They want to set up a new grow zone in the Sahel and North Africa using the new water resources that they expect to last for the next 1,000 years. This is at least a 1,000-year cycle change of rainfall starting to fall as regularly as we can measure our rainfall now here in Tennessee or something. And they could tap just like they do out in Midwest. And, everybody's screaming about the aquifers are drying out. They're polluting the aquifers and everything. They haven't tapped theirs yet there in Africa. So if you can move an entire food growing industry over there, and this is the most nefarious thing, the reason I'm trying to bring it up is their grand plan is to, because of global warming, stop growing food in all these other areas, move food growing to North Africa and the Sahel, put all the new investment capital there to restart the economy after this one collapses, and then have a centralized food distribution point for the entire planet from that area under control of, the same people and companies you just referenced. That's where they're trying to take it already because, and the thing that, is going, all right, well, they're already admitting then that food production in these same areas that were going offline because of the same cycle we're in, there's now an opportunity for them to consolidate the world's food growing area under one regional area. And, Africa is just so large on the maps. And the maps are deceivingly how small it is. It's very much larger than the maps are deceiving. Africa's, if it was going to be on, might be probably 3 times bigger on a map of any map you've seen. They could grow more in that area than all of North America combined on a double rotation crop. And that's only Sahel area. They didn't even squeeze over into the Middle East. We're talking like 30 million square kilometers. So food going offline, food is going to be the control weapon used during this time as well. And that's the reason I keep saying people, you need to grow your own gardens. You need to think about food autonomy, working with your neighbors. And it kind of spins back into, all right, so you validated cycles here. Some of the repercussions through past history.
Right.
Perfect. Thank you for pulling that up. Thank you for finding that. The map is very deceiving. It's incredibly deceiving when they do with our, current maps. That's how much land mass can fit in there. Now, make that part where it says United States up to Europe there, all that, all the way across the continent, all the way up to the Mediterranean Sea. And those aquifers refill because you see they're surrounded on 3 sides by seas. So for us in the Midwest or us on the West Coast, we only have one side to refill our aquifers. That's why it's a little bit slow and why it gets depleted. The sandstone porosity in these areas, there's a filtration zone coming off the Mediterranean that then leads into what they call primary water source in Libya. And this is where Gaddafi had tapped into this, and he was starting to grow hundreds of thousands of acres of crops, sorghum specifically, out in the southern area, which was the lake basin of one of the African mega lakes out there, as a proof of concept. And what did America do? We bombed all their water canals. That's a weird thing too. It's like, you're talking about bringing up a new growth zone in America. When we went out and took out Gaddafi, what do? We bombed all those waterworks projects so nobody could go in and see how it worked any longer. That's the whole. So if our economy collapses, you're going to have to move the money somewhere to start the economy again. And think about setting up the world's largest growth zone that's larger than you saw there, the United States and Europe and others combined. Like, how much money and time would that take, and how much of a world economy could we restart just doing that from the exports, processing facilities, hydroelectric dams, roads, railways, and all those things needed to restart everything just there?
You mentioned the BRICS, right? So this is the Belt and Road infrastructure, and there's a handful of maps that we can kind of look at here, but this is my first. I even look at right here, for instance, the showing. Here we go. Like showing these trade routes, right, that go from Europe to Africa to China across, Asia. So, and because I talk a lot about the BRICS and the larger battle I think is happening, right, between multiple factions, and the BRICS and what I refer to as almost like the Western Alliance, right, that they're up against, U.S., NATO, et cetera. So, because I know that China, which I've spent a lot of time, I've been to China, I used to spend a lot of my time over in Hong Kong and Taiwan, and I've studied, especially the CCP quite extensively, and I look at them as being the head of the dragon of the BRICS dragon, right? That they're the central, they're the ones I think they're helping back Russia for the war in Ukraine, et cetera. So if you look at the Belt and Road map and look at what China's doing with it, and you look at how heavily it's being put into Africa. So do you think that basically that China, which I'm fascinated by Chinese culture, the Three Kingdoms, and I've read a lot of their long Chinese classics, right, like Outlaws in the Marsh, and it just I think it's one of the most incredible cultures on earth, which I think is also why it was destroyed. Also, with China and the Asians, but Chinese specifically, I remember talking to Martin Armstrong about this, and he had a student that was Chinese. It was explaining, and the student had said, look, the Westerners think in terms of linear. You think point A to B. He goes, we always look at things as cycles. Nothing is linear, A to B. You don't go from 1900 to 2000 and a linear point. It's a cycle. And if you look at cycles in the Asian, Chinese specifically, it's very profound, looking at their understanding of the cycles. So would I be correct in understanding and deducing this from what you've told me, that China specifically, that they understand these cycles, they understand these shifts that are happening magnetically, they've understood it for quite some time, and how what they're doing is they're getting ahead of the cycle by building this massive infrastructure in Africa so that when that transition happens and when the growing in all the other regions of the world really comes and it becomes much more difficult while simultaneously opening up in Africa, that they're setting up between this, potentially a gold-backed global payment system, everything, they're setting up the next stage of history for mankind is what they're doing. Which really, if you look at the development of humankind, it's if you've read Peter Zeihan, for instance, going the role of even what happened once they developed windmills, so they could actually use windmills to grind wheat in an area where they didn't have to be next to a river, and how that changed the entire map of the world because of the development of windmills. So that China is basically getting out in front of it and trying to say, look, we're going to build the entire global infrastructure that's being built for the next stage of human history. What do you think about that?
Totally agree. Now, could I ask a huge favor? Can you bring that map back up again that you just showed with the southern China string pearls there? Okay. So the history part is fascinating. There's a couple points. No Chinese dynasties ever lasted longer than 400 years because these grand solar minimum 400-year cycles come in and knock them out. And the mandate from heaven's removed. It's the same exact thing. We just call it something different. So the Chinese would call it the mandate for heaven. It was the authorization from God, for a better term, or from the heavens to allow that emperor to be from the heavens to rule over the people. But at that point, when they couldn't feed their people, they were removed. And that happens about every 400 years on these same cycles. So they were very attuned into what it was. So you got to think about Chinese history too. 4,000 years, again, I'll say about 4,000 years. But that red line on the top is what you consider traditional Silk Road that went through the desert areas. The Southern Silk Road was also another one, the Maritime Silk Road. There was also one down there in Myanmar where Jakpi Port's not really there yet, but they're going to be sending a lot of grain and things from Jakpi Port up into Yunnan province. So 4,000 years of time, they've been traversing both of these routes for 4,000 years. Do you think they would have good data on when things changed or when it didn't change? Like, what's the correlation between a change down in the Nairobi compared to somewhere in Kazakhstan or coming out through Kashgar on the far west of Xinjiang or something? Like, that same time period, they've mapped up so many cycles here. They've probably seen at least 10 grand solar minimum cycles come and go. And they have the data on north points and south points, both sea route. They would know how the seas changed, sea temperatures, fish migrations, tidal action, that sort of thing on the southern route. And also those land points where it touched, they would know how the climate changed there. But then during the desert areas, they'd know when it would get greener, when it would get drier. They would have all these different data points through that area that on map shows for 4,000 years of multiple cycles mapped out. Who's going to control the future? Somebody who just sailed over here 200 and some years ago and says they know this continent, or if somebody who's been running trade routes for 4,000 years that actually knows? Again, it's the trigger points. They're checking boxes. Okay, it's coming back. This part in this area around the Tarim Basin's getting a little greener. Oh, those Altai Mountains are getting greener. Oh, the washout's coming. They built a huge hydroelectric dam coming out of the Altai Mountains out into what is like the Tarim Basin. They're figuring that they're going to be able to catch enough water to put up hydroelectric dams up in one of the driest places in China. Now, you don't do that on a whim. You do that because the cycle's repeating and the water's coming back. And that area there too, if you follow Nairobi and you go up into the Red Sea there, the New Renaissance Dam was built there. And that was in one of the driest areas of Africa also when they did the survey projects back in 2006 and 2007. White elephant, everybody was laughing at it. You're going to build the largest hydroelectric dam in Africa in the driest place. They're just scratching this milk money. And you guys are just stealing out of the UN and all the World Bank. You're going to give them the money? That thing filled like 5 years early, and now it's generating hydroelectric power, and they're planning 6 more dams stepping down out of Ethiopia down to the Blue and the White Nile where they connect. Like, somebody knows these cycles, and somebody knows the weather rain patterns are coming back into areas that are presently dry. But when it does get wet, you're going to want to have investment capital. You're going to want to have constant electricity. So our debt system had run its course in the West. Where do you take it from now? You have to restart it. Like, there's not enough people to buy houses in America anymore. So China can make everything. So imagine they're the ones that are building all of the infrastructure for a new agricultural zone across northern Africa and the Sahel. And not only that, an enormous amount of people are going to go there to work. So we're all going to be using stable coins because nobody's going to have a national currency anybody believes. So we'll be moving over to stable coin payment. And then all those people inhabiting those areas, that's larger than North America and Europe combined, plus a little extra. China can supply all of them with all the appliances and everything they need in their homes. So they're just like kind of done with the West because they see this giant opportunity with Africa to spur its economy. So you saw how much China went from 0 to 100. And Seth, you could probably attest to me, you know, I lived there too, and you worked there and everything. But how fast did that economy just go to 0 to 100 based on just already an aging kind of, you know, creaky Western world over here to buy their stuff. Now start from 0 and bring it all up together. Africa comes in and becomes the United States in affluence, like run that course with Africa from 0 to American affluence over a continent of that size. Astounding. And yes, I do believe that that's what they're trying to do and be a part of with the BRICS.
I love coming across this new information that helps shape this worldview because I guess it's pattern recognition, right? It's looking and finding patterns and things, and it lines up, and you have these moments where it's like, it's like all the...
Well, where's the actuation on the pattern recognition? Now it's pattern actuation, you know, that I'm missing that point too, you know?
Okay, so if you look at, you've mentioned a lot of different topics here, and we could do a whole show on currencies, which I hope that we do. But if you look at right now that the role of the dollar, right, the role the dollar has played, in my opinion, the deep state global system that, you know, has, in a lot of ways, we've been living in a very Western-led world, right? Going back into John Perkins, economic hitman, you know, the banks, the debt slavery, the control over countries, the color revolutions, the assassination of leaders, the control of elections. This is, in a lot of ways, all been possible through the dollar, through the ability to fund unlimited wars, to have an unlimited war chest of military black budget dollars, to develop technology, whatever it is, right? That the West has gained a significant control over the globe, but everything is waxing and waning in that the power of the West is now slipping, right? And it's a cycles thing too. I mean, even Martin Armstrong says that he sees the next cycle that the economic center of the whole world is over in Asia. It's no longer in Europe and America. It's no longer a Western-based, Western-led system. So with this, you know, we have this currency, this dollar bill that we've been using, and that has, in a lot of ways, it's made Americans' lives beautiful. I mean, look at, 80s and 90s. It's just there was so much money and affluence, and by, in a large part because of the strength of the dollar and what they're doing with the dollar. But now we're seeing we're entering into the death of that, especially if you then look at that with the BRICS de-dollarization campaign and the fact that you've got over in America, you have Jim Cramer and your local financial advisor is still saying, yeah, put everything in the stock market and it's going really well. Look, we're all-time highs. We'll hit 40,000, and you have that. But you go over to Asia and India. Like I used to be in the jewelry industry. Is one of the things I used to do, and so I used to go over to Hong Kong and sell diamonds and precious metals to Indians and to Chinese and to people from Hong Kong and Vietnam. And so I had a lot of interesting stories and customers over there, right? Very important families that are over there that I was interacting with. And what's interesting though is you see that their culture is built on the back of precious metals. It's like it's never changed. Like their government encourages, right, the purchase of, whether it's, silver, mostly gold in those regions, that, high carat, 23, 24 karat gold. But it's almost like they know something is coming, and they're trying to make sure that their region and their people is able to sustain itself. Whereas what it feels like here in America is that the leadership here knows something's coming, but they want the exact opposite to happen for people here. They want us to have complete financial ruin so they can do a Great Depression 2.0, come in, scoop up all of our assets, all of our land, David Webb, great taking type scenario over here. So
nightmare video.
Oh gosh, yeah. So how do you see, I guess if it is my assessment match yours, if it does, or in some way, how do you see things playing out over the next, say, 5-10 years or so? Because I feel like that the inflection point of the cycle that we're hitting is very, very close, like very close. Even this morning, my wife and I were talking to our nanny, and saying, look, we're talking about schooling. We have a 3-year-old that's, and we're saying, look, like we think that within 5 years, the whole world as we know it's going to be different. It's not going to be the world we look at right now. But what is your take on that?
We'll come to that PDF that I sent you. The near term is in the next 6 months, that transition point, which you're referencing, will be in earnest, in full play. Now, as it tapers out from there and moves forward and action, reaction, that's going to take a couple of years. But the whole thing is, if you do go back through history, like the Ottoman Empire after the wars, like how much debt were they responsible for repaying? None. Everybody forgot about it. Excuse me, after restructuring. And you go back to the Prussians. Okay, what happened during wars of that time? Well, that was 150 years. Everybody forgot about it. So the same thing, if it comes into a global war situation, even in World War II, who was responsible for paying the debt after that? One country, Germany. Everything else was rewritten down to zero. It was a war. We couldn't do it. It was an act of God. It was a war. We couldn't do it. So anytime these, things come in, acts of God or war, then all debt's written down. Oh, it was an EMP. It wasn't our fault. Well, we're going to have to write the debt down. Everybody knows they're not going to get repaid anyway, so they're just kind of playing along as, convening actors along this whole stage here. I'm convinced, I'm very, very convinced that every single head of state that you're seeing, and that includes all the BRICS leaders, all the Western leaders, they all know the cycles here. They're all playing their part because they all want to, survive through this and bring their nations through it. But what's to be sacrificed out there is this transition. And if you understood the areas that would be the most damaged on the planet, perhaps you would, just like in a business, would you cut an unproductive sector? Would you cut a money-losing quarter after quarter sector out of your business and just, we'll cut it, we'll sell it, and then we're going to protect the rest of it? That's exactly what I think is happening. So some of these areas that are earmarked for destruction, such as the Western nations, either we won't have the ability to grow the food, which will move food production to other places, or the distribution itself, either there'll be some rifting to the point where, like I was convinced that a lot of our bridges are going to be having difficulty. If there was another New Madrid earthquake in the same exact area right around St. Louis where it was in the early 1800s, we would lose I would say we would lose every bridge along the Mississippi. So think about that, and all the oil pipelines and natural gas pipelines and internet cabling and everything, the locks, everything would be non-functional. And how long would that take to rebuild? Well, you would basically split into two economies within a few weeks. That sort of thing. If they're already envisioning that, then why would you keep all your resources there and continue to funnel something? Maybe that's why our infrastructure's never been fixed, because, my dad will be driving and they're like, why can't they fix the bridges? Why has it all been left to rot, literally? Well, if you knew it was going to be shaken and baked through a cycle, would you even try to repair it? I would say no. But look through history. Almost every time there's a major war around the planet or some sort of civil upheaval, those debts are forgiven. So if you think the U.S. debt, they're going to get repaid, I think it's going to go to zero. There might be some sort of swap that allows him to come in on something for the future. But that whole thing, another interesting, since you were talking about gold, I was in Taiwan for the Lunar New Year and reading through the newspaper, and China was encouraging its citizens to buy 1 gram gold piece. They're little round, and they call it huangjian. It was one little gold bean is what they called it. And it came a little cute little glass piggy bank, and you would get your 1 gram of gold and put it in there. And they were encouraging everybody for their hongbao, which is like a red bag that you give during Lunar Chinese New Year, to put a little 1 gram gold to give to the kids, to give everybody. Because you know what? Central Bank of China is not demanding the gold. Our citizens are, and you better give us our gold, because everybody's got gold and we all want our huangjin do. Give us our 1 gram each times $1 billion. I think that's how they were getting so much gold in the country without really, people pointing fingers going, whoa, that's a huge amount of gold for the central bank. No, it was for the citizens. They're all buying 1 gram gold pieces for Lunar New Year. How dare you? Metals are real. They're encouraging their citizens to buy them. Why is it not here? Why are we encouraged to sell those metals and get paper? That's another thing. Look what they're doing over there. Why are you hit the nail on the head many a time already.
Yeah, and that's gosh, you're such a good point, right? And it's funny because I recently finished reading Atlas Shrugged, which is now one of my all-time favorite books. I'm not sure if you've read it before, but so much of what you're talking about is exactly what's in that. And they go into basically how these governments, these controllers, they come in and they've convinced people to trade in their real items for paper, right? I mean, it's also, you look at silent weapons for quiet wars. It's the same thing. How do they get this this energy transfer, how to extract the energy, the blood, the sweat of all the people on Earth in exchange for a paper that they have the ability to then cancel out at any minute. I mean, it's the great taking. It's a much bigger thing. So